Welcome back to another episode of Vue.js the hard way. And what I mean with the hard way is that we are learning Vue.js by simply reading the guide, the documentation, page by page, sort of section by section, and then we're talking about what all of these different things mean. And I'm trying to do as much as possible sort of with voice so that hopefully you can do something else while watching this video and sort of multitask and don't have to sort of keep your face glued to the screen. We'll see how that goes. So last time we talked about the Vue instance, and we're actually going to talk about the Vue instance this time as well. But we talked about creating a Vue instance and data and methods. And what I mean is we talked about the subsections creating a Vue instance, and we talked about the subsection data and methods. So essentially, how we like the options object that you can pass to a Vue instance, and the fact that you have a bunch of data available on the Vue instance after you've created it, and that you can call some methods on it. Now, we didn't dive into that in detail because the documentation isn't yet diving into that in detail, but it's already suggesting that if you want to know more about that, you can check out the API reference. Which I stressed quite a few times last video. So be sure to check out the last video if you haven't already done that. Anyways, what we're going to talk about today is instance lifecycle hooks, and we are going to talk about the lifecycle diagram. So these are sort of intimately connected. Like, we will check out the lifecycle diagram in order to understand the hooks. But let's just click hooks here and dive straight into this, right? Instance lifecycle hooks. So I talked a fair bit about what hooks are more generally in the last video. So if you aren't familiar with the concept of a hook, like when you supply a function to another function and that function will call back your function in some particular or at some particular time, right? So you're hooking into some particular point. You're listening, you're observing some particular event. You're listening for some particular event, and then your function will be called whenever that thing happens. If you're not familiar with that idea, then definitely check out the last video. But anyways, or rather, moving forward from that, let's just dive into it, right? So this section is instance lifecycle hooks. So they're emphasizing that there are a number of steps that the Vue instance goes through when it's being initialized. So think of this as that we are creating a variable. Actually, let's jump into our project again, right? Let me just remind you here that we have two files. We have index.html and we have main.js. Let's just jump straight into main.js. And these are the files that we've been working on throughout this series. So notice here we are instantiating the Vue instance. So we are saying var vm equals new Vue, right? So we are then instantiating an instance of Vue, or of the Vue class. And so what they're saying is that when you are instantiating the Vue class, a number of things will happen. And when these things happen, there will be a number of points where Vue the library will call back your hooks optionally, right? If you've supplied hooks, they will call back your hooks. But we should think about this. I mean, one way to think about this is that this happens. Not really. I was going to say upon instantiation, but like it's not necessarily upon instantiation, right? It's like when instantiating, a number of different things happen, and some of these things can cause your hooks to be called, or rather will cause your hooks to be called if you've put hooks, if you've hooked into these lifecycle hooks. Anyways, now I'm sort of saying the same thing multiple times. So you can observe these things. So what are these things that you can hook into, right? So here are some examples. Data observation, or rather, before data observation is set up. So before the reactivity system is set up, right? The Vue instance needs to compile the template. Okay, so you can say before the template has been compiled, it needs to mount the instance to the DOM, to the document object model, right? Think about that as that you have your HTML and then you have your JavaScript. And when you're instantiating a Vue and you are specifying an L property, like you're saying where it should be mounted, then at some point you have to turn this sort of hypothetical DOM into actual DOM. They have to, like, Vue, the library has to take that component that you've, or that sort of HTML that you've rendered in memory, and actually write that HTML to the DOM. They have to actually update the DOM, right? So it needs to be mounted, and the DOM needs to be updated when data changes, right? So there are a number of different things that might happen, and we're going to look at these. So these things are called lifecycle hooks, and they give you the opportunity to add your own code at specific stages. So I'm actually a bit confused about why you would want to use these. And I'm not saying I can't come up with scenarios where you could use these. Of course I can come up with scenarios where you would use these. It's just I can't come up with scenarios where I would use these and I wouldn't feel like I'm sort of like the code is smelly, right? As in code smells, right? As in, like, it just feels like, shouldn't there be better ways than sort of specifying callbacks? It kind of feels like we're hacking up solutions. It's like maybe a bit too pragmatic. But I mean, like, I'm giving the benefit of doubt, right? So we'll see. Hopefully we can get a few examples as we go further down into the guide. But I would just guess that you would need just like maybe 1 or 2 hooks. So there needs to be a place. I mean, we need to load data somewhere, right? And maybe the methods aren't enough, right? We've talked about methods, right? If you look at our code here, we have this add fruit method that we've worked with before that sort of is called when you click a button. And so you could sort of load data when that button is clicked, but you might want to have triggers that are sort of not based on user interaction, right? So like when you're like, let's say you're rendering a to-do list, you're rendering a to-do list component. So that to-do list component needs to fetch the to-dos from somewhere, right? Like, where are the to-dos coming from? So maybe that's so I've noticed you can do server-side rendering with Vue.js. I don't want to go into too much detail into that if you're not familiar with server-side rendering. But essentially what that is that, remember, you have the server and you have the client, right? And when we're working with Vue.js, we're purely on the client, right? It's like it's a client-side library. It's an MVVM pattern. So it's not about controllers, right? It's not about interacting with databases and all that stuff. It's just purely the Vue layer. The client layer. But of course you can make calls to APIs, right? So you can of course send messages or send requests to servers that will then give you responses that may or may not contain the data that you want. So this we're probably going to look a bit more into as we go along, and if not, then I think this will become more clear as I make the video on Vue plus Firebase, but that's a bit far into the future. But anyways, what I'm saying is that, yeah, if you're doing server-side rendering, then maybe your components would be sort of preloaded with the data that they need, and hence they don't need to fetch data upon mounting, let's say, or upon loading. But if you're not doing that, like if it's purely a client-side script, right? If it's not like it's if you haven't rendered it already on the server. Let me put it that way. Let's do this. If I open up index.html and we'll open up this in the browser. Let's just look at this, just so I have some context of like some concrete example. Think about this, right? We have this list of stuff here, which is like, we're pretending it's a shopping cart, but it could be a to-do list or anything, right? It's like we have 2 pieces of apple, 10 pieces of pear, and 4 pieces of banana, right? Let's say that this is an actual shopping cart, or like, I don't know, like some inventory, or since I use the word cart, let's say it's a shopping cart, right? So these are hard-coded, right? I actually hard-coded these in the main.js file, right? They're part of the data model. But that makes no sense, of course, right? Of course, like when we would initially render it, it would probably be empty like this, right? It's empty. But if I'm a sort of recurring user and my shopping cart has been saved on the server, I understand that this scenario doesn't really make sense because a shopping cart would probably be saved on the client side. But I mean, if you have an account in the thing in the place where, or in the service you're using, then maybe you have a shopping cart in your account, right? So it's like they're persisting your shopping cart across your usages of the same application, so that when you come back, your shopping cart is still there, which of course is a great idea. But anyways, then when we load this page, that data needs to come from somewhere, right? So when are we going to say, populate the model with this data, right? It doesn't really make any sense to say, like, first load the data and then start to do all the view stuff. Like, because then the user will sort of be staring at an empty screen while we're sort of crunching data, and then the whole thing will be rendered. Probably it makes sense to just render it as a template where it's like you have an empty list, and then suddenly stuff shows up asynchronously, right? And then probably you would want to solve that somehow with like a loading text or something like that, so that the user knows that there is currently data being fetched for you. But anyways, so somewhere you're making that call. Somewhere you're sort of on the behalf of the user saying, let's call the server and see if this user has any items in their shopping cart or not. So when are we sending that request? And that I can understand, right? Like, that is of course an instance where you would probably want a hook. You would probably want to say, before this component is rendered, or like when this component has been rendered or mounted, or we'll see what the term is that they're using, then make this call so that the data model can be updated. That makes sense. But I don't know. I mean, otherwise, I'm not super sure. I found this article, and I haven't read the whole thing. I've just sort of skimmed a few parts. But maybe you would find this interesting as well. Understanding Vue.js lifecycle hooks, right? So it's a blog post, and this person was suggesting that you might also want to use some of the hooks to interact with non-Vue.js libraries. And I mean, I'm not sure specifically what this means, but if you have scenarios where you need to sort of call arbitrary code and you're not finding a good place to call that arbitrary code, like, I don't know, like maybe setting something up that you need to call later, like creating instances of some third-party library. But again, like, it just seems to me that most of this stuff should probably be handled in methods, right? It's like, I try to simplify things as much as possible, right? It's like when coding, I think that's probably a good idea. So it's like, so I'm thinking of it as that there's some stuff that needs to be done before we can construct the component, and there's some data that's being passed to the component by the parent component who's rendering this particular component. And then the rest of the stuff we should be able to handle in methods, because that's just stuff that happens when the user interacts with this component. Or, of course, it's reactive. So it's happening because there are changes in our data model. So yeah, maybe it's something like that if I think about it. Yeah, I was going to say that maybe it's something like we would listen to updates in our data, and then we would have to maybe call the third-party library in order to recompute some property that's a computed property. But I assume that actually, this is interesting. I didn't think about this. I wonder if they support computed properties somehow. Probably they do, right? So can you, in your template, render put a function, right? Like, instead of, and I don't mean as a method, right? I mean, like, can a property in the data model be a function of other properties rather than just a value? Because if it can, then I really don't see why we would need these hooks. But yeah, and here you can see, of course, I just checked the table of contents here. You can see computed properties and watchers, right? So there are computed properties and there are watchers, right? So you can even hook into probably the fact that something is updating. But yeah, I mean, if you have any ideas about when you would want to use these things, do share something in the comments. That would be interesting to read. But again, like, I guess these hooks should be thought of as things that you so what I'm trying to say is you can use these hooks when you want to break the boundary of Vue, and you cannot solve it the sort of, let's say, canonical way, right? Or you cannot solve it using methods or computed properties or by passing data downwards, because those just fundamentally feel more, let's think about it, like not isolated, but that just feels like better encapsulation to me, right? Because, like, why would you... Yeah, okay, so I digress. I should drop this, right? Because maybe there are some really good reasons, and I'm just sort of so killing this point now. So anyways, okay. Let's drop that. There are these hooks, at least. I'm a bit skeptical, and I would think twice before using them, because, again, probably there are much simpler ways of designing the application than using these hooks. Okay, that's that. Now, for example, they're showing an example here. There's the created hook that can be used to run code after an instance is created. So you're instantiating Vue, and when you're instantiating Vue, you're passing in this options object that we've talked about tons of times. And one property of the options object is the data object, or is the data model, and that's an object. And here they have just an example where A is pointing to 1. So it's like the key is A and the value is 1. And then they pass another property in this, or they specify another property in this options object, the options object that's being passed to the Vue instance, or the instantiation, to the Vue constructor, I should say. Sorry. So this is essentially the hook, right? Notice this is not a method, because if it was a method that we created ourselves, that we called created, then this would be scoped within methods. So then it would be like, in the options object, we have the methods property, and that's an object. And in that object, we put a method that we call created. Now, maybe that's a reserved keyword, I don't know. But if it's not, then we could do that. But here we're not doing that, right? Because what we're doing is that we are just specifying it sort of on the top level of the options object, which means we are passing in a function that we want to have called when this created thing happens, right? We don't yet know what created means, but we'll figure out in just a moment. But we're essentially then hooking into this idea of created. And what they're doing here is just, what are they saying? They specify a function. They add a comment that says that this here will point to the VM instance, so the Vue instance that we have instantiated. And of course, it's important then to remember that since these lifecycle hooks happen at different points in the lifecycle, this will probably be slightly different in these different scenarios, because it depends on when this hook is called within the lifecycle of the Vue instance, right? If it's like after it has been mounted into the DOM, then that's probably a different thing than, like this is probably slightly different from when before it is mounted into the DOM, right? Because it's about like the existence of the DOM versus not the existence of the DOM. But I think you're seeing what I'm saying. So okay, so this points to the instance, to the Vue instance, but the instance might be slightly different in these different scenarios. And I mean that as in, not as in that the data might be different, but I'm suggesting that maybe even the okay, actually interesting. Sorry, I was going to say even maybe the type would be different in a strict sort of static typing sense, but actually it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could just be that we have, like we maybe have values. We maybe have values or we don't. So it's like, I've seen, for example, the EL property might or might not exist. But anyways, now I'm sort of trailing off topic. Okay, so what they're doing essentially in this created hook is that they're just, like in the callback that they're specifying here, they're essentially just console logging the property A. Interesting point. Because then you could console log the properties and we would see whether the properties have been added yet. I mean, they should probably be available even from the first hook, but I guess the point is that since we can hook in before and after the reactivity system, then we should be able to see the getters and setters or not. So that's pretty interesting. So I think we should try the same thing as well. So, and then they're of course saying that, oh, okay, and then they say that A is, I mean, the output of this is that A is 1. Actually, let's try this ourselves because I'm wondering if we get any more output. So let's just refresh this so we have back the text that we had before, and then we will hook, right? So we have data here. So I mean, we are saying var vm equals new view, and then we're passing in an options object. We're specifying the EL property as the hashtag app, or like the element with the ID app. This is all from stuff that we've done before. And then we're specifying the data model and the methods model. Actually, let me break out the methods here just to make that simple as well. So let's pass in methods like this and say var methods equals like this, and then I'll save the methods here. So I'm just putting the methods in a separate variable, so this is a bit cleaner. Let me line that up. Okay. Actually, let's run that to make sure that this all works still. Okay, cool. I'm just wondering, what is this, like ES 2015, 16 syntax? I'm just wondering, can I change to this syntax or not? No, I can't. Okay, so probably then I have to use Babel or something. Whatever. Okay, so we have the data and we have the methods, right? I did this extraction into variables just to make it very clear that these things are sort of scoped, right? These are like the property fruit, or the property fruits, or the property add fruit are all things that are scoped in either model or in methods, or in data or in methods, I should say rather. Sorry, actually maybe it didn't work before because I should have said data here. Data. Yeah, so then I wanted to say data and methods, but probably, again, still this probably doesn't. No, okay, sorry, this actually works. So this is just shorthand syntax, right? Where I say, I'm able to say data here, and that just means the property is called data, and the thing I want to put under that property is the thing that has a variable name called data, right? So shorthand syntax, right? It's the same thing as saying data colon data, and then methods colon methods, right? I have no idea whether, methods. I have no idea how browser compatible that is, so maybe check that before you use that. But since we're exploring Vue.js now, we're not worried about browser compatibility. Anyways, so to add the watcher, or sorry, not the watcher, to add the lifecycle hook, what we want to hook in is, let's check what they were hooking into, created, right? So let's do essentially the same thing as they are doing. Function, console log, and then let's say, well, we'll just console log fruit, I guess, right? This dot fruit, let's say. Okay, and then we'll see what that gives. So I open up the console. Let me make that a bit bigger, and then let's refresh. We get orange. Right, we get orange. So, okay, which is interesting because we're getting the string orange. Why am I saying this is interesting? Because if I would do VM in the console here, dot fruit, I would get, no, actually I still get orange. Sorry, I thought I would get a thing that has properties. I'm a bit surprised. Okay, wait. Now I'm a bit confused. Is it like VM? I mean, on VM.data, I have the observers, right? But how can, I mean, shouldn't, okay, so maybe I'm invoking the getter. Maybe that's the thing, right? Get set. No, sorry, I'm not invoking the get. Okay, sorry, this is just me misunderstanding JavaScript syntax. It's like when I say VM dot fruit, I am invoking the getter. I'm invoking the getter, and that's why they can listen to that. But when no, sorry, I said getter. I'm of course invoking the setter, right? But and when I say vm.fruit, I'm invoking the getter. So I'm not actually getting the getters and setters of fruit. So I can't see whether there exists getters and setters. And that's actually what I was interested in, right? If I say just vm, you can see, or sorry, vm. Yeah, I mean, we can see them here as well, I guess. Yeah, sorry, now I need to just move this window a bit. And get fruit, set fruit. Yeah, I mean, we can see we have the getters and setters here, but we also no, but under no, yeah. So we're invoking the getters, and what I wanted to see was the existence of the getters or the setters. So, anyways, I guess. Sorry, wait. Let me figure out this. Sorry, madness. Okay. So what we could do, of course, is to console log this. We could console log this data, this dot $sign data, which we learned about last time, right? That would make sense. Right. Then we can see we have an observer where we have getters and setters for fruit and for fruits. Okay, that's what we were actually looking for. Sorry about that. So yeah, when it's created, the reactivity system is set up. And now, okay, so maybe that's been interesting. Let's jump over this section a bit. We'll come back to this, and let's just dive straight into the lifecycle diagram. We'll go back and review the other stuff as well. But what I want to see is the thing that we've hooked into is created, and that's here, created. And here you can see in the visual diagram that happens after the reactivity system has been set up. So that seems to work. But then there's also before create. And that happens before the injections and reactivity system is set up. So let's try that out. Let's do the same thing, right? Let's say before create is a function that essentially just console logs this $sign data. So logging out the data object of the Vue.js instance. Okay, syntax error like that. Sorry, refresh. And then you can see, okay, it's even undefined. So the data object isn't even set up, right? I was thinking maybe we have pure data, but of course, yeah, that makes sense. We probably don't. Let's just console log this to see what we have then. But at least, I mean, it's evident that the reactivity system is not set up. Then we're getting a Vue instance. Can we see our data somewhere? We actually have data here. Fruit and fruits. Why, I'm so confused. That is so odd, right? Hopefully you're seeing that as well, right? We actually get, maybe that's, I hope that's not some oddity with JavaScript, but probably, so hopefully I'm just misunderstanding. I mean, I wasn't able to say console log this $sign data, but if I console log this, I can see that actually there is, no, sorry, underscore data. No, here and here we have, no, but here in this one, in $sign data, we actually have, yeah, I should let this go because I'm so confused. Observer. Yeah, I mean the array, the fruits is an array that has some observers, but fruit doesn't look like it has observers. No, sorry, of course, those are here, get and set fruit. And so what I looked at before was probably, I guess, this underscore data thing. No, but even here you have getters and setters. So, but I mean, it was, let me just refresh this again. If I expand this Vue instance that's being outputted, you can see that originally it was grayed out sort of like this, and I don't actually know. Yeah, so invoke property getter. So there, it's probably just saying that since it hasn't been called, we don't know, like the console doesn't know what the value is yet, so we can invoke it. And then we get that back, and then we can see that there are getters and setters. But I have a slight hunch that this might be because of mutation and because of, because the Vue instance is mutating, and so since it eventually will be created, the console sort of is updated in retrospect. But because I've been sort of struck by those errors before. But anyways, please, if somebody knows, do let me know in the comments, because that just seems like the most reasonable explanation. Because if we just console log this $sign data, we do get undefined. So it seems to me like the property $data isn't actually defined at the point before create, which would make total sense if we look at the documentation, right? Because the documentation is suggesting that before create, you don't have the reactivity system. So it would make sense that you don't have the getters and setters, right? Yeah, I don't know how I should be, how I could explore this otherwise. Let's try to print that underscore data property as well. Let's just try that one more time. Yeah, and even that's undefined. So yeah, I mean, I would assume this is probably some weirdness that maybe is useful in other scenarios with the console in Chrome. But if I'm misunderstanding this and you know why, please do tell in the comments. Okay, so that was before create and created. So we were just trying out two different hooks now, but we jumped ahead in the documentation, and where we actually were was that we were at this example. And then they of course say that there are other lifecycle hooks, such as mounted, updated, and destroyed. And all hooks are called with this, with their this context pointing to the Vue instance, right? Which we talked about. And also there, I mean, this sort of box here is just emphasizing that of course you can't use arrow functions and expect this to behave the same way. So what I mean is let's remove before create here, and let's just only keep the created hook. And then again, like, let's look at the output. You can see that we get back, yeah, okay, sorry, instead of outputting data, let's output this.fruit, for example. So I'll save that and I'll refresh, right? Then you can see we get orange back out. Maybe, sorry, I should make this a bit bigger. We get orange back. But if I use an arrow function here, so notice this syntax is what they mean with an arrow function, then that's scoped differently, right? So the keyword this is not referring to the insides of that function. I mean, it's not referring to the scope in which that function is defined, but no, but that doesn't make any sense. No, what I should say is this. It's not about the scope that this function is defined. Actually, I mean, what we're doing now, then we are referring, so using this arrow function, and the keyword this will now refer to the scope in which this function is defined. In other words, here, right? It's like, it's the same thing as saying here with VM, right? Like this refers to here. So let me show that. If I just refresh, you can see we get undefined now because we don't have fruit. But wait, I'm a bit uncertain about whether I'm correct here, but let's just try this. Let's say fruit here is foobar. I'll save that and let's refresh. Actually, no, that's undefined. So maybe it's actually like this. Foobar. Yikes. Okay, so let's just output this instead. Wait, fruit. Okay. Let's console log this. Window, post message. Hello? I can't. Oh, okay, that's huge. But I would assume then that this would have access to variables. Yeah, okay. No, okay, so that's, yeah. So what we're referring to is this window. So that's what this is referring to. But I'm super surprised that so if I say foo, right? So we're declaring a variable foo, and we're setting that to just a string foo. I was surprised that if I say this.foo, we're not actually getting that. No, but we are getting that. What did I do wrong before? How strange. Const foo. Oh, it's because of const. Wow. Ooh, hoisting. Oh, this is a topic for another time. Guys, let's not talk about this now. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, let's not talk about that now. But maybe also, okay, actually, maybe it's not hoisting. Maybe it's actually just that things are scoped differently. So the point is essentially, I guess, like, I guess we always have access to the variable window, right? Sorry, it's been too long since I did client-side JavaScript, right? Yeah, we always have access to windows. So the point is, if we define window.foo, let's say bar, we put the string bar into that, and then I'll refresh, then we get bar here, right? So essentially this here is referring to window, but it's not always referring to window. It's referring to whatever context this currently refers to, right? It's like the function. So whatever this refers to, in which whatever this refers to in the context in which the function that you're defining is defined, that's what this is referring to when you're using an arrow function. So like the scope is here, or like the context is here. But when you pass in a function, right? When you do this, when you use the function syntax, then you're saying, here's a function, and whenever you execute that, or wherever you execute that, sorry, I should say, the context of wherever you're executing that, that's the so difficult. The context in which you are executing that, the keyword this will refer to something in that context, and that's what this will refer to inside this function as well. That kind of sounds like I'm not making any sense. Hopefully that makes sense to you, right? The this keyword will sort of refer to whatever the this keyword is referring to in the context in which the function is executed rather than defined. So when you use an arrow function, it's sort of the context is where the function is defined, and when it's a sort of regular function syntax, then the this keyword will refer to what the this keyword refers to in the context that it's executed. So defined versus executed. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let's drop that. So the point is essentially, if you want to use the this keyword, make sure to use this function syntax instead of a arrow syntax. It's a bit unfortunate, right? I mean, it's some of the drawbacks of this keyword, because clearly the arrow function syntax is super nice. Okay, anyways, don't use arrow functions. That's what they're saying. La-di-da. And yeah, I mean here also, I mean they have a link here for arrow functions, so you can read up more on in the Mozilla docs for JavaScript. Okay, now the lifecycle diagram, last thing, and then we're gonna cut this. So pretty quickly, let's go through this. This diagram is a diagram of the lifecycle, right? And they're also emphasizing here, you don't really need to fully understand everything now to get to keep going, but as you build more, you will learn more, and you may want to come back to this image because it's a useful reference, or it's useful as a reference. And again, like maybe check out this other blog post that I mentioned before, and probably there are tons of others, right? Because that's referring to the same picture and then trying to explain some of the different parts. So let's just jump through this. Let me actually let's switch places of these two screens so that we can see a bit more of this. Maybe let's zoom out a bit. Ooh, not so nice. Yeah, so okay, now we can see almost the whole thing. Actually, let me do this instead. That makes no sense. Okay, so let's start from the top. So you're instantiating Vue, right? And then we're talking about, okay, what are the different things that happen, and what are the different points to which that you can hook into, right? Or like, which are the points that you can throw in a function and say, call this function when this thing happens. Okay, so first there's something like init, events, and lifecycle. I don't actually know what this means, right? But after that has happened, you can say before create, or if you hook. If you listen, let me just say it, if you listen to the event, right? Or if you add a callback to the hook before create, let's say that. Then your function will be called before reactivity is set up, which is the next box, but after this sort of events and lifecycle stuff has happened. Actually, let's jump off over to this other side. Let's jump up to the blog post and let's look for before create. Runs at the very initialization of your component. Data is not reactive, and events have not been set up. Yeah, but what has been set up? I guess that's the question, right? Yeah, okay. Anyways, there's going to be a level of hand waving here, and hopefully we'll be able to understand this further down the line. Some of the stuff has been set up, but reactivity has not been set up. Okay, what's the next hook? The next hook is created, and that happens after the reactivity has been set up, right? So you can think about that in this sense. Do you want to do something after your component is reactive, or do you want to sort of brute force change something. You want to like, okay, before all of this, all of these different parts start to react to each other, let me change something first, or like let me start to do something first. And again, like this, no, yeah, something like, I was gonna say if you wanted to fetch some data that we talked about before, maybe you would want to use before create, but of course you don't want to do that. You want to use created to ensure that the reactivity system is properly set up, so that whenever you have new data, it's propagated through all the observers, or through to all the observers. Like it's, yeah, you need the reactivity essentially. Okay, so but then you have before create and you have created. Okay, before and after reactivity. Next. Then there are these, so I mean, notice they're not just explaining the reactivity system here, they're also explaining sort of what happens in a Vue instance. And what happens here is that they ask, do you have you specified the EL option, the L option? Have you specified an element in which you want to render? If the answer is no, then we end up in this interesting path where they're saying, when VM, which is then like your instance, when your instance $mount, and then passing some EL is called, then you'll go to the next step. So this seems to suggest that you can actually construct a Vue instance. Let's look at this, right? Oh, sorry, actually I was at our Vue instance. So we have our Vue instance here, and if I don't specify the EL property here, it seems that that's totally legal. It's not like Vue is going to crash. Actually, let's try this to make sure that it doesn't crash. If I refresh, yeah, you can see it doesn't crash. But it seems what we should be able to do is we should be able to say VM.$mount and mount it to, what was the element called? Let me undo backwards here without saving. So yeah, hashtag app. So the ID is app. Sounds maybe unsurprising. If I do that, wow, it works, right? That's actually pretty cool. I didn't know this. That was pretty cool. So yeah, you can set up your components beforehand and then mount it. I don't know why you would do that, right? But maybe you have some scenario that requires that. Again, like these to me sort of seem like edge case scenarios where you sort of have to interact with some third party thing, or like something makes you break the nice boundary of Vue so that you have to do this thing which is like an unnecessary amount of mutation. But anyways, you can't do that, right? So that's why they're saying that there's this path as well. It's like you might get stuck here if you don't have the L option and you haven't called mount yet. Okay, but if you do have the L option, then the next question is whether you have the template option. And if you have the template option, then then Vue will compile the template into the render function. What a strange sentence. Compile template into render function. What is this star? Star. Template compilation is performed ahead of time if using a build step, for example, single file components. Yeah, okay. We'll understand that later on. Yeah, but yeah, this seems, if using a build step, for example, yeah. So this is probably related to the command line interfaces or something like that. Like if you're using some kind of build system to package your Vue app, which makes sense if you're working with something bigger. But I mean, if we're learning Vue, let's not think about it. And even for small applications, let's not think about it, right? Like, let's just be productive. Okay. EL option. So yeah, if we have, so we were saying if we have the template option, then that's what happens. If we don't have the template option, here's something interesting, right? Then we end up with this: compile the EL's outer HTML as a template. And this sort of zones into what we were discussing. I can't remember in which video, but in some other video where we were saying that it's a bit funny because if we jump to index.html, you can see, actually, let me turn off wrapping here. Sorry, I should put that in my vimrc file so I don't have to redo that every time, but I keep forgetting. So you can see here we have specified app, right? We have this div app, and it has a bunch of code inside of it. It has a bunch of elements inside of it. And I was sort of thinking, oh, well, but it's pretty strange because the template can only be a single element. But like, it seems that this is a template that has multiple elements as sort of, no, I don't mean nested. I mean multiple, like, siblings. Hopefully siblings is the right word, right? Like, yeah, brother, sister, this kind of thing. They're all on the same level, right? It's like, you have this UL element, and we have this input element, and then we have this button element. So like, which one is the template? That's a bit confusing. But actually what we can figure out from this is that they're saying compile else outer element as template. So I was misunderstanding when I said that, oh, we have multiple, it's like we have multiple templates, but we don't. This whole thing is the template. The div is the template. And this is actually pretty interesting. I mean, if you think about it, sorry, just quick sidetrack, super quick. If you take an element, so let's say document get element by ID, and then we get the app, let's say, okay. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't put hashtag. Okay, like that. So then we have this thing. If I then say dot inner HTML, what is that, like this maybe? No, sorry, like this. Wait, HTML. I like this. Okay, sorry, let's clear and then let's redo. So document get element by ID app, and then inner HTML. Then you can see it starts with UL. But if I do outer HTML, then it starts with a div, which, I mean, from the name maybe makes perfect sense. So it's like you're getting everything inside the element versus everything outside the element. And that's sort of this, I think that's how we can make sense of the existence of both being able to compile into an element that has already specified its template versus being able to compile into a template. And it also seems here that template has precedence over outer HTML. So or EL, exactly, or over the EL's outer HTML. So let's actually try that. That's actually a very important thing to know. Let's make sure that the page is working, right? It's still working, right? If I refresh, no, sorry, what did we do? Because we removed the mounting. So a very good thing that I checked this. Let's undo. No, wait, how did I move? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I removed the EL element before from Vue. So let's save that again. Let's refresh. It works, right? So now we're saying render into EL, or I'm specifying the EL property in the options object of the Vue instance when I'm instantiating Vue. And then we're passing in the ID app. But what we're saying is that what if you also have a template that maybe specifies, I mean, let's just do something simple. Let's say there's a span that renders the name of the fruit, or renders the fruit property, essentially. Let's only specify that so that they're different. Okay, and then let's refresh. Then you can see template takes precedence over EL. So we're not we're totally replacing this other thing that we've specified in the HTML. And you can see we truly only have this span. We've sort of removed the whole app element. I assume, like, let's even do this. Document.getElement by ID app. It's gone, right? Null. It's gone. So template takes precedence. But if you remove the template, now we're back into sort of rendering into EL. So that, I think that actually makes sense. So probably you would always want to specify a template. So then it's easier to reuse your components, I assume. But for your outermost component, you would want to specify the EL properties so that you know where to render into. Right? Because like there needs to be a point in the page where it's like, well, this is where you're rendering into. Sorry, I have to let the cat in. Going for a super long time. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. Or actually, sorry, we're not done with the life cycle. But yeah, this definitely wraps up the yes/no question in regards to templates versus EL, the EL property. So then we have a few more hooks, right? We have before mount that happens after these, right? So regardless of how you render, regardless of whether the previous question, the answer to the previous question is yes or no, you will have something to render. You will have a template. And then the next hook is before mount. And I don't actually really know like what's the difference between, like what the difference is between created and before mount. I mean, clearly it has to do with this template stuff. Like something else is available. I think, actually, and from skimming that other article, I believe it is the EL element. But the consequences of that, I mean, I can't really say, right? So if we would hook into, what was it? Before mount, So let's add a function, and then we say console log this dot el, right? And then so we're gonna compare before mount, and we're gonna compare the next one, which is mounted. Function console log this dot $el, right? We're just console logging them. So the first one is before, oh sorry, syntax error, forgot a comma. So let's add that, and then let's, whoops. Sorry, the cat really wants to hang out. So no, actually we have it. It's actually available both times. But again, like, this might be this whole thing. Let's do this actually. Let's do this. I want to have a string back so that there is no weirdness. Like let's say inner HTML, right? Just so that we have a string back. Sorry, wait, cat shenanigans. No, but actually it seems we're getting back. No, but okay, so that's interesting, right? Check this out. So if we ask for the inner HTML, we actually get different pieces of inner HTML. In the first one, like before mount, we actually get the template. And that's cool, right? And after we have mounted, then we actually get the rendered template, let's say, right? Like the when the data has been mounted into the template. So this is like the raw template, like with the mustaches and all that. Yeah, with the mustaches, except we don't have any mustaches because we used v4 and like vbind. But after we've mounted, we get with the actual data. Okay, so that seems to be the difference, right? And of course, this wouldn't be the case. So if we were comparing to created, let's do that as well. So let's say created function, let's call that, and then we say console log, and let's console log the same thing. This $el inner HTML. Save that, and let's refresh. So now the syntax again, and then this. Okay. Okay. View warning. Cannot read property inner HTML of undefined. So actually EL is undefined when it's created. So I'll remove the inner HTML colon. Let's just refresh this. And then you can see it's actually undefined here. So yeah, EL is not even defined when at the created hook. So that's the difference, right? When you have created, or in the hook, in the lifecycle hook created, EL does not exist. I mean, I shouldn't say that's the difference. That's a difference, right? So upon when it's created, we don't have EL yet. L, maybe I should say. But before mounting, we do have L, and then L actually refers to the template. And when we've mounted, we've sorry, I get stuck because this text error says create VML and replace L with it. Ooh. So maybe we should actually print L also. Okay, wait, let's do this in a moment. But so before mount, in before mount, the $L refers to the template, and when it's mounted, the $L refers to the data mounted into the template. Let's actually print L. I'm just a bit concerned about, or confused about. It seems like they're saying, let's try this. Let's just quickly try this, and then we'll close this. Console log this dot el, like that, right? I guess. Let's refresh. Where's that? That's this one. Oh, that's undefined, right? And even if, so we can't say inner HTML, of course, because it's on undefined. I just want to make sure that it's nothing strange with the console. No, okay, so I don't actually know exactly what that means, but our analysis seems fairly correct. Like it has to do with, I mean, probably this is just a strange wording, and I'm not sort of getting the wording, but essentially it seems that what before mount, or I mean, what happens between before mount and mounted is essentially that the data is rendered into the template. And I guess that's sort of what they call mount, right? It's inserted into the DOM. The data, Yeah, the data is mounted into the template. That's maybe a very sensible way of thinking about it. Okay, and then we have this super big red dot where it says mounted. Yes, after all of this like stuff, we've now ended up in a state where it's mounted. You now have a Vue instance in your DOM that you now can update. And then you have the reactivity system. So you have two hooks here, before update and updated. And before update happens when there is a change, but before that change has been carried out. And updated happens when there is a change, but after that change has been carried out. And of course here there's this virtual DOM re-render and patch, right? So Vue updating the DOM for you. So let's just hook into these, right? Like let's say console log, we need to hook into before update, add a function, and we're gonna do something, and then we'll hook into update, updated, add a function, and then we'll console log, but I'm not entirely sure what we're gonna console log. Let's say, but let's do fruit, right? So let's say this dot fruit. We're just getting the property fruit in both of these cases, right? And let's just see what we get. So if I refresh here, let's clear the console, and then let me add a period here. Then you can see in both of the cases we actually got orange period. Wait, was this undefined from here? Let me refresh, clear. Let me add an S, oranges. Oh, I forgot to look. Clear. No, okay, sorry, it's undefined all the time, even if I'm clearing. Okay, undefined is the response of clear. Sorry, silly me. Okay, so why are we getting that? That's kind of confusing, because I was thinking before update we would get I was thinking that we would get but maybe it's about like, maybe it's more about like computed properties. So it's like if something depends on fruit, that thing will not have been changed yet. Whereas if... No, wait. Maybe what I should do is... Okay, no, let's do this. Fruits.length. Let me try one more thing. Fruits.length. Let's refresh. Let's clear. And if we add one fruit now... No, we have 4 and then we have 4. 5 and then we have 5. Yeah, that's interesting. So when data changes, before update is called, and then virtual DOM re-render and patch. Actually, let's jump into this. Let's see what this guy says in this blog post. Before update. The before update hook runs after data changes on your component and the update cycle begins. Right before the DOM is patched and re-rendered, it allows you to get the new state of any reactive data. Okay. So your state has been updated. It's all new. It's all fresh. Like the reactivity system has done its work, but the DOM has not been changed yet. So if we would do something, if we would do some shenanigans, like let's say we would do this. Let's say we would say document.getElement by ID, and then we need to add an ID to our list. So let's say our UL has an ID of items. Let's say maybe I should say cart items. And then let's jump back into main.js, and then we would say get element by ID cart items, and then let's say inner HTML. Okay, and then let's copy that and do the same thing in both of these cases. Let's clear, and then let's add something. Ooh, it didn't get anything. Oh, because I didn't console log. So let's console log exactly what we wrote. Now same thing, we were just remembering to console log now. And now you can see that we actually get different things, right? I'm clearing and then we're adding. this thing, the first console log is different from the other thing. Let's just, since this is a string, we could just take the length of we could just take the length of the inner HTML. So we're taking the length of the string. Whoops. We're taking the length of the string just so that it's easier to compare because we don't actually care about the contents. So if I'm clearing again, I've updated, we add a new thing, then you can see the length of the inner HTML of the list in the hook before update is 70, and the length of the string when it's updated is 94, because in the second case we've actually added the new cart item to the list, right? And as you can see, of course, and of course, right, if we do it again, then before update will be 94 the first time, which is the second number the last time, right? Because it's the this old is the old new, and now since we've added another thing, it's now 118. Okay, so that's cool. So essentially the point of before update and updated is that you have a chance to inspect the data before it's rendered to the DOM. Again, I'm not 100% sure why you would use that, but yeah. No, but yeah, okay, but yeah, but maybe you would want to do, again, like you could use that to send off requests or something like that. But I guess like you have to be very careful because we're really in this observer situation now where it's like it's probably very easy to accidentally get lots of reactivity. So it's like a single thing is changing and then suddenly tons of different things are happening as a reaction to that. So we probably need to be very careful with, for example, sending off requests to servers just because something is updated or like before something is updated. But anyways, now I digress. So you have that possibility. Now the next thing is it's mounted and that's fine, but then what you can do is you can also call $destroy. It's an instance method, or it's a, what did they call it? Yeah, I mean it's an instance method on a Vue instance, and I guess that's to sort of destroy it, to remove all of the reactivity and to like unregister all of the observers so that you don't have any of this reactivity. So again, like if you would have hooked into something and added a call to a server somewhere, then probably you would get rid of that thing by calling destroy. Then you're saying, okay, well, I don't want any of this anymore. And then before destroy, so then you have a before destroy hook and you have a destroyed hook. So yeah, and here you can see, I mean, the sort of high-level description is that destroy tears down watchers, child components, and event listeners. So it's sort of like does this cleanup. And of course, then before destroy, you can use to maybe destroy things that you've set up that Vue has no possibility of having any idea about, right? So I don't know if you're maintaining instances or relationships that needs to be destroyed so that you're avoiding. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, you're avoiding spawning off requests that you don't want to have spawned off, or like you want to free up memory that would otherwise be taken up. Like I guess this whole problem of like memory leaks and observer pattern. But yeah, you have that possibility to destroy stuff that you want to destroy, and of course, I mean, you could use it for anything else rather than destroying. But again, like the question is, maybe do we want that, or do we really want that, or do we want that, or don't we want that? Anyways, and then after destroying is done, it's destroyed, and then you have the hook destroyed, and that is it. Except it's really not entirely it, because what we looked at here was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hooks. But if you check out the API reference, let me go to the table of contents here. Oops. Hello. Okay. You can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hooks. So there are some more that aren't actually in that picture. And I think so. Error captured wasn't in that picture. Activated and deactivated was not in that picture, right? No. So there are 2 more hooks that are activated and deactivated, but the rest of them should have been in there, right? Yep. Super good. So there are those as well. And but yeah, as mentioned last time, you can check out the API reference for more information about that. And of course, we have more information about all of these the lifecycle hooks that we talked about now here as well in the API reference. So for example, destroyed, here you would see called after a Vue instance has been destroyed. When this hook is called, all directives of the Vue instance have been unbound, all event listeners have been removed, and all giant Vue instances have also been destroyed. But this hook is not called during server-side rendering. So hopefully we'll talk a bit more about server-side rendering in the future as well. Let's see. Is that actually here in the guide? Oh, I've lost. Let's click the guide here again. We were on the next page, the Vue instance. Aha, sorry, maybe I just had to scroll. My bad. Sorry, I thought it was bunging out. Okay, but we were at the Vue instance. But my question was, are we going to talk about server-side rendering? We will see. We will see. Hopefully, right? But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff here, so hopefully we will. Anyways, let's call that the day. This is the lifecycle diagram. Great diagram. Obviously helps to understand a lot. But anyways, let me wrap this up. Thanks a ton for watching. Remember to subscribe so that you won't miss the upcoming videos in this series. Glad to have you along. If you survived to this point, yay! And again, like if you're working on something in Vue, feel free to share that in the comments. Not that you don't necessarily have to share links, but like just tell us what you're experimenting with, and let's talk a bit of Vue. Thanks a ton for watching, and I will see you in the next one.